What you just heard was the Zero Gravity Options music. I know, that sounds pretty extreme for Options to have such a banger of a soundtrack, but back then a lot of games really did have a exclusive track dedicated to Options. What makes the track even more special is that both its Options theme and the main menu theme in Zero Gravity are both instrumentals of both vocal themes in Zero Gravity. Keep in mind, Zero Gravity is just one Sonic game, and most Sonic games have banger soundtracks, and Sonic has also remained pretty consistent at delivering consistent Options themes, and most of these are very unique, and some of these also have very unique renditions of each other. A great example of this would be the Generations Museum theme. However, this isn't only a Sonic the Hedgehog video. We aren't only going to be focusing on the blue blur here, so I'd want to highlight a few other games, especially from the PS2 era, that I think have excellent soundtracks, and some of these games are willing to take the extra leap and add a special track for its menu and title screen. No, I'm not going to have any Persona on the list. Yes, we all know Persona makes great music. As we all know, we've all heard Beneath the Mask a million times on every commentary video at this point. So I wanted to start with a very underlooked gem nowadays, which would be Bakugan Battle Brawlers. It was a 6th gen game that released pretty much on everything, but the soundtrack itself is a certified banger. This is just one of the few examples of a game that is licensed having a great soundtrack. For Bakugan, I especially want to highlight its main menu theme and the room theme. The main menu theme is very special as well because it has a unique rendition of the main US Bakugan theme. This is only when you actually start the game and select the save file. This is the only time you hear this track in the entire game, which is pretty surprising considering how good it is. But that's just something that's pretty common with licensed games, surprisingly. A lot of these games have unique soundtracks, and most of them are unfortunately cut really short. And with Bakugan, it experiments a lot in the rock genre. Take a listen to the room theme and listen to how different it sounds compared to that main menu theme. And that's just a small taste of Bakugan Battle Brawler's soundtrack. I would love to showcase the multiplayer theme here, but I want to save that for another video down the road. I highly recommend listening to the soundtrack as well as most of the soundtracks that I'm going to recommend on this video. What's super interesting about this as well, a lot of these early 2000s licensed anime games usually had a pretty funky jazz soundtrack when it came to showcasing Options. A great example of this would be the original Budokai series and Infinite World. I can catch myself humming the Infinite World soundtrack nowadays since it still lives rent-free in my head after all this time. And it's a real surprise that a lot of people still have yet to notice how good this soundtrack is. Obviously, everyone knows about the BT3 soundtrack and how iconic that is, especially even BT2. But I think the original Budokai series, especially Infinite World, are pretty overlooked nowadays, considering the whole controversy that happened with the original Budokai 1 and its stolen soundtrack. And there is a younger generation of Dragon Ball fans, along with people that never had the opportunity to play the PS2 catalog of Dragon Ball games. So a lot of this is going to sound very different from what a lot of people are used to when compared to modern Dragon Ball. Super Survivor for BT3 is an exclusive track that was only composed for that game. Unfortunately, nowadays most of the Dragon Ball games are held down by Cha-La Extra-La as their opening themes, and it really sets the tone for what you should expect. However, that doesn't mean that these games don't have good OSTs. With Dragon Ball Xenoverse being over 10 years old now, its soundtrack still holds up really well. Unfortunately, Xenoverse doesn't have an exclusive options theme like the older titles. This theme is primarily used for the character creation, character select, and map menu theme, meaning it's used universally throughout the game. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but like I said, it's a lost art nowadays that you get games that focus exclusively on having a unique options theme. And if you're not into the more upbeat soundtracks that I've recommended previously, Duelist of the Roses has a very laid-back classical jazz soundtrack that I think highlights it to be one of the stronger games that's overlooked on this list. Unfortunately, this is the only game in the series that really has this level of smooth and chill ambiance to it, and similar to Bakugan, I'd love to start with the menu theme. Unlike Bakugan, it sets a consistent tone throughout the rest of the soundtrack of what you can expect from Duelist of the Roses. The menu theme has a very relaxing yet strategic feel to it. It's a very unique soundtrack in that regard, as even the deck edit feels similar. And to bridge away from the anime games for a while, I want to talk about Crash of the Titans. I did talk about Crash in my last YouTube video regarding Devil May Cry clones, and I did sprinkle in a bit of that soundtrack there. The reason I did that is because I really enjoyed the soundtrack for this game. And I wanted to use a very lesser popular Crash game, as we all know how good Twinsanity's OST is. Crash of the Titans actually doesn't have a unique options theme, instead it's used over multiple menus in a similar vein to Xenoverse 2. You can't talk about video game option music without talking about Nintendo, obviously, so I'd figured why not throw in a very unique one, which would be from Mario Kart Wii. The options theme in Wii is very interesting to say the least. It fits with a lot of the soundtrack that Wii already provides, but it has a very quirky feel to it. That quirky tone is accomplished by having dial tones from a phone, making it feel like you're having a conversation with Toad. Certain characteristics like this are missing in a lot of modern games nowadays. FF15 is another game that I think highlights this really well and having unique characteristics that make it stand out. Crystalline Chill has a very unique flair to it if you're a Final Fantasy fan, and the reason for this is because Final Fantasy shares a similar motif throughout its entire series. and FF15 uses this in its options menu. For our next example, I wanted to talk about Code Vein. Code Vein starts off very loud in comparison to most menu themes, and it's because it knows that it has to grab your attention. I'm not the biggest Souls fan, but I do think the soundtracks themselves in each title are very fitting for the gameplay and the tone they try to set, and I think Code Vein does it extremely well, coming straight out of the gate swinging. And for the last game of this video, I want to talk about Doom 2016 and its main menu theme. This theme is so subtle in the background because you'll usually be out of the menu so fast that it's barely recognizable. But once you catch a glimpse of it, it's really noticeable, and especially because of how good it is. I wanted to use Doom as the last example in this video because Doom is a very fast-paced game, especially 2016, and unlike its sequels, it doesn't really focus the storyline as heavily as the others. And when you first get to that pause menu, you're going to be wondering, is there even music playing? Main menu and option themes are nowhere near dead. There's still indie developers and larger companies still attempting to keep them somewhat relevant. But with the introduction of super fast SSDs on console, they're just gonna die out faster and faster. Menus don't need music to be good, obviously, but it does make the player actually acknowledge the tracks rather than it just being something from the game. It makes it feel special because it's like the developers actually took the time to throw in a unique track for when you pause the game. It's why I really appreciate classic PS2 games, especially the licensed ones that went above and beyond to make themselves stand out and feel like video games and not just cash grabs. Hey, you made it to the end of the video. Why not consider subscribing, maybe liking, disliking, either or. If you think I missed any, I'd love to actually hear any recommendations for video games that have banger menu soundtracks. So, put those in the comments. I'd greatly appreciate it. Other than that, later.